I'm really intrigued by the Bible character King Solomon. He obviously an incredibly wise man, possibly the wisest man who ever lived, maybe ever will live. His wealth and the extremities of life are so intriguing. He just presents as this sort of a really interesting character. But you know, his wisdom, his whole lifestyle really kicks off when he becomes responsible to oversee the nation Israel after his father David. And so God appears to him in a dream, and God invites Solomon to ask whatever he will of God. Solomon pauses for a period of time and thinks on this, reflects, and then obviously he responds to God and he requests that he wants a receptive heart. He wants to be able to judge and discern between good and evil for the sake of his people, Israel, that he's responsible to lead. He needs a wise and understanding heart. So that's his request to God. Lord, will you grant me that so that I can lead these people well and honorably before you? Obviously, God grants that to him, and God says, because you've asked for those things and you haven't asked for the things that perhaps people would want to ask for, which is wealth and riches and honor and all that sort of stuff. I'm going to grant you those as well. So God grants him this incredible wise nature, wise understanding, and God grants him riches untold, honor among the people that is just absolutely amazing and incredible. And then immediately after we read all of that in First Kings chapter 3, we come to this part where two women, they're prostitutes, and they're living in the same house, and they have a child each, a baby boy each. And so one lady rolls over during the night, and she seems to suffocate or accidentally smother her child. So she gets up and she swaps the children. But the other lady then realizes, hey, wait a minute, this is wrong. Something's happened to my child here. So she complains, and they argue and fight a little bit. Then they confront King Solomon and say, you know, this woman has accused me of stealing her baby. This is untrue, and so on. And then we read this amazing account of God, of Solomon's wisdom given to him by God in First Kings chapter 3, verses 24 to 27. Let me read it to you. So they've just appeared before Solomon here, and the woman says, "This is my son who is alive, and your son is dead." But that woman says, "No, your son is dead, my son's alive." So they're bickering, and Solomon says, the king, "Bring me a sword." So they brought the sword to the king, and the king said, "Cut the living boy in two and give one half to one woman, another half to the other." And the woman whose son was alive spoke to the king because she felt great compassion for her son. And she said, "My lord, give her the living baby," she said, "because please don't have him killed." But the other one said, "He will not be mine or yours. Cut him in two." Then the king responded, "Give the baby to the first woman and don't kill him. She is his mother." So we see immediately the wisdom of Solomon coming through there and resolving a dilemma. And then we read these amazing words in verse 28. All Israel heard about the judgment the king had given, and they stood in awe of the king because they saw that God's wisdom was in him to carry out justice. So Solomon's got this amazing wisdom now from God, and he's going to carry out the justice among the people. And the people, therefore, are confident, hey, this is our great leader. This is God's man. We're in the right place. This is good. We're going to be a blessed people. And so he's got all this wisdom, he's got all this wealth, he's got all this incredible honor from the people. But later we read in his writing in Ecclesiastes, in chapter 1 of Ecclesiastes, verses 16 to 18, these words. So here's what Solomon says of himself. He's incredibly successful. He says, "I said to myself," he's having this conversation with himself, "see, I have amassed wisdom far beyond all those who were over Jerusalem before me, and my mind has thoroughly grasped wisdom and knowledge. I understand wisdom, I understand knowledge, I've got everything, all this wealth, I've got everything." He writes, "I applied my mind to know wisdom and knowledge, madness and folly. I learned that this too is a pursuit of the wind, it's nothing." Then he says these words, "For with much wisdom is much sorrow, as knowledge increases, grief increases. For with much wisdom is much sorrow, as knowledge increases, grief increases." As I read those words, I consider Solomon to be sort of in the ranks, probably above the ranks of people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and Bill and Melinda Gates and Twiggy Forrest and Gina Reinhardt, who are incredibly wealthy people in this world today, and obviously have incredible wisdom and knowledge and understanding, and they're able to have this great sort of business savvy and so on. But Solomon says here, with much wisdom, which they seem to have, is much sorrow. And if you look at their lives, you see sorrow in every one of their lives. Then he writes, as knowledge increases, which they have, grief increases. Trouble seems to be nipping at their heels quite often. Now, the reality is this: most of us cannot put ourselves in that same category, if you want, as the people mentioned there in King Solomon. But I'm really thankful for the words of the Apostle Paul, as he writes over in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 26 to 31. So Paul's writing here of himself, and he's writing of every believer. He's writing of you and me, and he says, "This is who we are in Jesus Christ." I want you to see the work of the Spirit in your life, the work of the Spirit in my life. And Paul writes these words that are just so comforting, encouraging, incredible, and helpful. So verse 26 to 31, he writes here. Brothers and sisters, consider your calling. Not many were wise from a human perspective. That's probably a lot of us. Not many powerful. That's a lot of us. Not many of noble birth. That's definitely us. Instead, God has chosen what is foolish in the world to shame the wise, and God has chosen what is weak in the world to shame the strong. God just turns life upside down in that sense. God has chosen what is insignificant and despised in the world, what is viewed as nothing, to bring to nothing what is viewed as something, so that no one may boast in his presence. In other words, our lifestyle changes are all to do with God. It's what he's done and not about what we have experienced or what is happening in our lives. Paul continues, it is from him that you're in Christ Jesus, who became wisdom from God for us, our righteousness, sanctification, and redemption, in order that, as it is written, let the one who boast in the Lord. So we find our boast in life is not to be in the wisdom that we've gleaned, not to be in the understanding that we've amassed, not to be in the wealth that we find around us or the comfort of life, but rather is to be in the Lord and what he has done in our behalf and what he's doing through us. So I want you to be encouraged today as you find your boast in what Jesus Christ has done for you at Calvary, and as you celebrate the wisdom of God in your life, because he enables you to understand the deep truths of himself, and God is revealing himself and his understanding and his knowledge to you. And after all of that, Paul goes on to say then in chapter 2, in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 16, that you and I actually have the mind of Christ. He writes here at the end of that chapter, for who has known the Lord's mind that he may instruct him? In other words, there's nobody. But Paul says, but we have the mind of Christ. What an incredible privilege. That's real wisdom right there. You've got the wisdom, use it well for the Lord's glory this week. Live for him, honor him, and serve him, and use your wisdom that he's entrusted to you and given to you for his glory. And his wisdom that's in you, it turns the world upside down. Be blessed as you live for him this week. Thanks for listening. Look forward to catching you next week.